Okay, can everybody hear me? Good. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this World Youth Festival plenary discussion, which is entitled The Era of Robots, What Can We Expect in the Future? My name's Conor Lennon. I'm a broadcaster. I have a background at the BBC and the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation. And today I'll be leading what I think will be a fascinating discussion about the many ways in which digital technology is changing and will change the world. I'm joined by this group of renowned international speakers, each of whom follows this subject very closely, and they can help us to better understand what's happening now, and we'll hear about their visions for the future. We're going to hear a short presentation from each of them, and that will be followed by a discussion, and then we will have some time to ask questions. So as the title says, the robots are coming, and it sounds kind of scary, doesn't it? It does make you think of a metal army trying to take over the world, and I'm sure you've all seen science fiction films with humans fighting for survival against an unstoppable metal army. And now we're being told this isn't just a vision for the future, this is actually happening already. Every day I read articles, I'm sure you've seen them as well. They come from respected sources saying that our jobs are at risk from automation, artificial intelligence, and from robots. And we're not just talking about basic, simple jobs in factories. We're talking about jobs that involve brain power, and that's the main difference. So in offices, you can even go to a website if you like. It's called www.willrobotstakemyjob.com, and then you can find out for yourself. Key figures on the technology scene, people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, they have themselves warned about the possibly disastrous consequences of automation and artificial intelligence. And we're not just talking about the destruction of jobs. They're even worried about the future for human life itself. But there is another point of view, and that's that digital technology will set us free. Free from hunger, free from boring, repetitive tasks, and free to concentrate on more interesting, better paid work. And it can solve some of the world's biggest challenges: climate change, poverty, disease. So who is right? Should we be worried, or should we embrace the technology? And to start things off, we're going to go to our first speaker, Adi Gaskell. He's come from the UK. He's an innovation writer and consultant, and he's worked with major international companies and media organizations such as the BBC, Forbes, and Huffington Post. Adi.
Thank you, Conor. Before I came here this morning, I looked at some of the headlines that are talking about automation and technology in the workplace, and it was all pretty pessimistic stuff, very dire. I've got a sample here. Americans love automation until it comes for their jobs. Automation will affect 1 in 5 jobs across the UK. Automation will put 28% of young workers' jobs at risk. It's pretty depressing stuff. But I'm, by and large, an optimist about the potential of technology to impact society, and I'm optimistic primarily for 3 main reasons. So the first one is that we've been here before. We're in the midst of what the World Economic Forum called the fourth industrial revolution, and each of the preceding 3 had technology that massively disrupted society. It had people that were pretty pessimistic about that disruption, and they protested very violently in some cases about the changes that were being wrought on them. And yet, here we are, centuries later, people still have a lot of work to do. Society hasn't disintegrated. So I think there's some lessons to learn there. And when people have analyzed these past industrial revolutions, they typically follow a similar pattern. And it's began usually with quite a disruptive phase. It's very quickly to change. It's very rapid and disruptive, and the benefits of it tend to be focused quite tightly on a small group of people. Then that bubble tends to burst and there's a recession, and after that, that's when the real benefit hits society, because it's a slower growth, it's spread more widely, and the benefits of technology tend to be democratized a lot more. And we've done that 3 times now, and I don't know that this time is going to be different, but that's my second reason to be optimistic, because people do think that today is different, that the technology has a bigger impact, it has a broader impact on more jobs in a bigger way than we've ever had before. Now, there's an interesting paper from the London School of Economics that attempted to analyze that. And they looked over the past 40 years across 17 countries at the phenomenon of a jobless recovery, which is when the economy picks up, but the jobs and employment don't necessarily come alongside it. And they looked at around 71 of these over that time frame, and they were looking specifically at technology and the impact that it had on employment. And they found very little. They looked at the kind of jobs that technology could do and the industries that were investing heavily in technology. And in both of those areas, across all of the 17 countries that they analyzed, there was no noticeable difference between the professions that could be automated and the industries that were investing heavily in technology and those that weren't. So I called into question the idea that technology today is markedly different to the technology of the past in terms of the impact that it can have. Now, the third reason I'm optimistic about our ability to adapt is around the whole narrative of the pace of change. And the rhetoric around this is very indicative. It's the creative destruction of Joseph Schumpeter and the whirlwind of change that's happening, and we don't have time to adapt because it is so quick and so violent. When in reality, I don't think it's like that at all. And a good example for me is the driverless car. It's probably the most prominent example of an autonomous technology that we've got today. Now, that was first proposed back in 2004 with the DARPA Innovation Challenge by the US military. And the early entrants into that weren't particularly good. They would go a few meters and then they'd either crash or stop working in some way. So 2004 probably isn't a very good signal unless you're Jean-Christophe and you make your living out of finding these very weak signals. So let's move forward to 5 years after that to 2009, which is when Google first started investing into driverless technology. Now again, Google, a big technology company, that may be a good signal, but their early efforts were relatively poor. So let's move forward another 6 years to 2015 to get a really strong signal that driverless technology is something that we should take seriously, because that's when they first started testing it on public roads. So it's a big company investing an awful lot of money into the technology, and it's also being used in quite an advanced way. So we use 2015 as our baseline. Most industry experts in the car sector are saying that driverless technology will be a mass product around about 2025. So we're talking 10 years between when Google cars were on the public roads and when it's going to be a mass disruptor of the labor market. Now, I think 10 years is a reasonable time frame to invest in retraining, invest in the kind of skills that we need to adapt. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's easy or that our societies are necessarily equipped to help people make that kind of adaptation, but I think it is doable. And I'm reminded of the famous quote by Charles Darwin that it's not the strongest of our species that survives, it's not the most intelligent, it's the most equipped to adapt to change. And I think humanity over its history has shown that it's remarkably good at adapting to change, and I don't foresee any reason why that's going to change either today.
Thank you very much, Adi. And I just want to pick up on what you're saying. So you're saying that you don't think this is markedly different in the impact it's going to have. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think most of the examples of AI today are what IBM referred to as augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. And it's making what we do better and more effective. It's not necessarily replacing our jobs entirely.
So these apocalyptic headlines you see, they don't worry you?
I've got a lot of mixed feelings about the methodology used in some of those studies, and I don't think they're particularly robust, which we can get onto now or get onto later, depending on how you feel.
Yeah, I'm sure we will come back to it very soon, but I just want to move on now to our next speaker, Jean-Christophe Beaunis, the French futurist, an expert on new technology who works with small and large companies to analyze the impact of technology on consumer behavior and business strategy, a highly experienced speaker, writer, who's traveling the world outlining his vision for the future.
Merci, Connor. Je vais avoir le plaisir de vous parler en français. Un petit peu C'est tracer les perspectives des années à venir. Alors concrètement, on va où? Qu'est-ce qui est en train de se passer? Est-ce que dans les 20 ans à venir, nous n'allons pas perdre de job? Je suis malheureusement en train de vous dire le contraire. Alors, reprenons l'exemple qui vient d'être dit dans le domaine de l'automobile. On sait de manière assez certaine que dans une quinzaine d'années, la logique d'intelligence artificielle et de voitures autonomes, totalement autonomes, va, dans le meilleur des scénarios, détruire 85% de la production automobile mondiale. La problématique est la même dans le domaine, par exemple, des camions. Simplement aux États-Unis, toute la logique des conducteurs de camions, c'est 1,5 million de jobs. Est-ce qu'on va perdre des jobs de manière nette? Non. Parce qu'effectivement, à chaque perte de job, la logique de destruction créatrice est totalement différente et on va en créer. Je vais vous donner des exemples qui sont des exemples assez frappants. Quels sont les 3 pays au monde les plus automatisés? Corée du Sud, Allemagne, Japon. Les 3 pays sont tous les 3 en plein emploi. Pour des raisons certes différentes, mais à chaque robot, il y a besoin d'une dizaine d'emplois autour, qui sont des emplois liés aussi bien au software que autres. L'enjeu, il est totalement différent. L'enjeu, il est d'accompagner les populations de manière à ce qu'elles puissent, dans les années à venir, réussir à faire cette mutation. On va prendre votre exemple à vous. Avant de venir ici, on nous a briefé, on nous a expliqué que vous étiez tous principalement dans des logiques qui sont des logiques médias. Vous voulez être journaliste, vous souhaitez être journaliste. Est-ce que foncièrement vous allez servir à quelque chose demain? Non. Je suis désolé de vous dire les choses comme ça, mais si on prend les choses de manière classique, est-ce que demain vous aurez un job? Non. C'est quoi l'intérêt aujourd'hui de transmettre de l'information là où des robots le font en instantané 100 fois mieux que vous? Votre enjeu demain n'est pas du tout de transmettre de l'information. Votre enjeu demain est bien de prendre de l'information, de la travailler, de la transformer, de la réfléchir, d'ouvrir des questions au niveau mondial, c'est-à-dire d'avoir une réflexion autour de l'information. C'est là tout l'enjeu et toute la différence. Aujourd'hui déjà, il y a des intelligences artificielles qui sont capables de retransmettre l'information de manière pure, basique. On est aujourd'hui dans un monde de l'ultra-instantanéité. On parlait de Snapchat, on parlait de ce genre de choses. On est sur des schémas où l'instantanéité tue la réflexion.
We are talking about chats, we are talking about other digital mass media, and the speed of information transfer is very high. So you are not processing this information. And that's why it's very important to understand how this information is impacting you. And once again, let's talk again. I'll give you another example. Let's go back to another example, which goes back to the epoch of enlightenment. So we're talking about hashtags. We are talking about hashtags today, and we send tweets in a Twitter this very second, and it's already on the net. Today, it's not possible. When we speak about artificial intelligence, we cannot. Cannot forget about the terms which are in this or other way linked to the artificial intelligence. So look at the look at my country. Some information is artificial, and we are talking about superficial or artificial things. And the future of today, the future for us tomorrow is just to make add some depth of human thought to such technologies, and to add some integrated idea or thought, because robots, will they destroy all the jobs tomorrow? I don't think so. Our task is just to start thinking more deeply, more profoundly, basing on the examples that I've given you and I heard today. We have another topic, another challenge. That's the so-called humanistic values. For the first time, we find ourselves at a serious stage of Homo sapiens evolution. And those challenges that these technologies present to us are new challenges, and we've got to think about them on the planetary level. Let's imagine that we're talking about nuclear weapons of the 21st century. Today, President of the Russian Federation and the Academy of Sciences several days ago explained to us that the country which is leading in artificial intelligence will be the leader of the world. The same has been said in China. And this scheme applies to the other countries as well. This idea is present, and we've got to face such challenges. We've got to respond to such challenges. We've got to think about those mutations that we will see in society. And the human being and people must find answers to such questions. And we represent the fourth power. And your ideas, your thoughts, your perceptions would also impact on society, how people think on the whole about such challenges. Do we have a right today to speak about some deliberations? Yeah, we've got to deliberate and think. We're launching specific challenges today, and your generation tomorrow will have to deal with such challenges and find responses. The great difference is that we live through epochs, not within centuries, but within a few years. Another example, Google has launched a competition in the game Go, which is called the DeepMind, which also incorporates a British company. And the idea was to win the Go game with the help of using artificial intelligence. And Google managed to do that. And Nature yesterday published a new article about an algorithm that provides no information to us. Actually, this article is about a new algorithm may appear within 40 days that could help improve the results at this winning Go game that I've spoken about. So right now, we're talking about something which is not a utopia. So 40 days, a machine can make
directly of importance to you. I just want to pick up on the added value of humans. So the transmission of information, okay, going forward, that's not something which is going to be useful for human beings, such as the ones we have in this room. But you're saying it's about, it sounds like you're saying it's about opinion. It's about developing the capacity to have opinionated journalists. But I mean, this exists already, doesn't it? Don't you think there'll be a glut of, if everyone here is involved in opinion rather than reportage or investigative journalism?
Je pense que la problématique majeure est qu'aujourd'hui, on est dans une solution de facilité. Il est trop simple de donner l'information, il est trop simple de ne pas prendre de risques. Et je pense...
Well, we were talking about the information, and to be honest, if we talk about a digital society, I'm also a part of this digital society. We are becoming as human beings poorer as far as the intellectual potential is concerned, and it is also connected with our laziness. You know, with the laziness of a human being, we have to keep thinking. It's not that we want to be smart smarter than a machine or quicker or faster than a machine, it's going to win anyway. But tomorrow we need to code and decode information for children. The challenge is that what is the main quality of a human being? Thinking. And it has to be a complex of different things, including ethics and morality. And no computer so far has been able to achieve that stage of the development in the thinking processes. So let's remain human beings. Let's keep on thinking creatively.
Of importance to people like you. This is obviously of big importance to business. So what is business doing, and what is the attitude that business has towards artificial intelligence and automation? And to help us understand that, we have Maxim Yeremenko. He's a specialist in risk analysis for Sberbank, and part of his job involves separating the hype from the reality when it comes to a future dominated by digital technology. Maxim.
Thank you, Connor. I'm sorry, could I ask to raise the hands to whom who cannot speak Russian fluently? Okay, I'll switch into Russian. Добрый день.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Connor has introduced me as an expert in risk management. I actually research data in banks, but historically I do refer myself to risk management, and it is the kind of industry that has been living within the past 15 years on the basis of mathematical decisions. Because if you take decisions on on credit risks, on the basis of mistakes is far too expensive. So we need mathematical logic for that. I have a couple of slides which demonstrate the work of my team and how we all of us are trying to distinguish between hype and reality. And on this graph, you see that within the recent 60 years, there is a tendency towards problems being resolved by artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence was addressed by Alan Turing in the 50s. He said, he was talking about tests, and the main idea was that the person has to distinguish a person and a robot. And at that period of time, the cognitive systems were not automated, and automated cognitive systems never existed at that period of time. But he said also that machines may move forward, but it is important for the humans to have a button which to press when they want to stop the prevalence of machines over human beings and to stop the process.
As compared to the 60s, and we see that the machine intelligence and AI they are winning chess games, and let's say as compared to the 70s, 80s, when Garry Kasparov lost his game to the Deep Blue, but it's something different already. So 20 years later, the world champion in Go lost his game, the game to a computer, to the artificial intelligence. And right now, the researchers who are working in the sphere of AI, and one of the tasks is to create some bots that would be playing at more complicated games, action games, and irrational agent behavior, so like poker, for instance, where people can bluff. And the problem is that, as Stuart Russell said, he's one of the famous AI researchers, that even given the present day level of development of artificial intelligence, if there is a button which can switch off a robot, it doesn't mean that the robot will permit a man to switch itself off. And we can expect there will be a time when robots will forbid people to cut them off. And we see widespread of neural networks when robots work with different visual algorithms, and they recognize even better than people, that human eye, what's in the picture, those things which are in the picture. And so the Facebook and Google and other and other centers now try to teach machines to forecast what's going on and what will happen in the future, basing on the movie sequence. And for the past 3 years, we see great attention is being given to the use of neural nets for forecasting purposes. There are lots of ethical challenges related to it, and the speakers have mentioned that. For instance, autonomous or pilotless transport vehicles in the next 10 or 15 years, and we may see smart cities, and smart cars will be driving along the streets in such smart cities. And so then again, it's a matter of responsibility, and who will assume the responsibility for that, and how it will all be regulated. If there's a car crash, for instance, if this car, pilotless car, drives into an obstacle and runs down a pedestrian or kills the passenger, so well, somebody outside, from the outside, should predetermine the next issues of the next steps related to responsibility. But nowadays, already people are ceding a portion of their functions in the decision-making sphere to AI, and then so who would be responsible for the final decision for responsibility, if we talk about liability in particular? And so all these topics are very important, and so should we try and delay or block research in such spheres, although major corporations have already made their choice in favor of smart technologies and speech recognition chatbots. These are telecom companies, mobile operators. They are using widely such technologies. And here we expect the major breakthroughs in the next 5, 7, 10 years. And the greatest breakthrough or disruption may be expected in the area of augmented reality, which would help people make more effective decisions. And since I'm running out of time, that's the last slide, which I wanted to show to you. That's another citation of Stuart Russell, another researcher in the sphere of AI, who said that if all AI technologies continue developing as impetuously, humans would soon be able to understand the feelings of primates when the latter first saw people. So according, in many areas and in many tasks, we see that the machine intelligence copes with the cognitive functions better than we do. But it doesn't mean that we should stop research, stop this development. But we have to have a more accurate understanding of risks, possibilities, and threats, and try and address such issues and challenges in a combined, comprehensive manner. That's it, I believe.
We'll have to move on for time, but I just want to ask you one question very quickly before. So you're talking about you compare us potentially to gorillas compared to the computers. It won't be easy to switch off. Maybe we will never be able to switch off the robots at some point, or the automation. And perhaps you're talking about the coming of the singularity, which some people are talking about in just a few decades' time. I'm just wondering how that kind of speech goes down when you're speaking to a corporate client. How do you evaluate that kind of risk? With difficulty.
Do you mean for financial purposes, for practical usage? Yeah?
For practical use, if you're speaking to a Sberbank or another client.
Just as a lot of other corporations that make decisions. There's a risk assessing system. One can assess the risks of corporate clients by analyzing financial statements. You can collect big data. You can analyze such data, including the payment transactions. You can analyze the client behavior more accurately, more effectively by using the machine learning techniques. So any model, any system of decision-making, including human decision-making models, become obsolete, and experts' knowledge becomes obsolete in our world very fast. As for self-learning technologies, they help us catch new trends that we identify in the market, that we can see at the level of singular individual clients, and that's the main task. Actually, risk assessment was the first task that we enhanced, that we made more effective by using big data and machine learning techniques. To say nothing about such directions as biometrics and recognition of speech, transformation of speech into texts,
когнитивных ассистентов.
Natural broadcasting for cognitive assistance, for robots, robotization, and more accurate decision-making systems globally.
A bit later on in this session. I'm going to turn now to another Maxim Kozlov. Maxim is a virtual reality expert and the founder of Interactive Lab, and he's been creating spectacular, immersive VR experiences for clients since 2014. Maxim Kozlov.
Да, всем добрый вечер.
Good afternoon. Not evening yet, but afternoon. I am not going to talk about artificial intelligence. I'd rather speak about another wave that is ready to engulf us, virtual reality, VR. Because, well, the VR is helps us usual users to get information by different means as compared to TV, radio, internet, etc. And I can give you actual practical examples and the practical practices that we see in Russia, how the virtual reality works, how it gradually steps into our lives. Right now, it's mostly used at the B2B level. Not all people have VR helmets or technologies, but maybe in another 2 years, and just seeing how Google and other major corporations are working. Obviously, they are focused on everyone to have these VR glasses or some kit that would help you get information from new sources and by new ways. So I can demonstrate to you several cases about things as they used to be, as they were yesterday, and as they are now. So this is a stereo camera. Everybody remembers it, and things are changing in principle, and there is a new trend, cameras, 360 degrees cameras. They are making shots and videos from every side. So basically, you at the same time can capture everything which surrounds you. And such cameras give you a chance to generate 360 degrees content. Well, we don't have such movie houses yet, but maybe already you can watch the streaming of concerts, of conferences, of festivals using the 360 technology. If you cannot come here, it's very convenient, and certainly it helps create some new formats, very interesting. And the filmmaking industry is gradually making films, movies, although, let's say, not the full features, but sort of short films. And, for instance, an animated cartoon was recently received an Oscar nomination. It was done in this technique. And so very soon we'll have a separate Oscar for 360.
And this is a format when we're watching a film in stereo glasses, watching the 360-degree content, and it already exists. And actually here in Russia, we're doing a lot and working in cases and building cases of virtual cinemas. This is what it looks like. It might seem strange, a lot of people sitting there like zombies in glasses and doing things or watching, but this allows people to see a picture from a different point of view. We are taking you with the help of virtual reality to a particular space. It's very immersive, and in any case, that's what the future is going to be like, the content is experienced from a totally different perspective. Take a look at this. This is a VR zone of a cinema. There's common sound. They're listening to the sound. Take a look at people there. They're looking at a picture and following the main character. And it's not the future. It's already happening. It's in the present. And, well, it doesn't mean that we won't stop going to the cinema. We will, but we'll be watching a 360-degree content. Now, presentations. I use a clicker. I present slides. But this is one of the examples of how you can make a presentation of a farm which is situated in a remote land. You were using a 360-degree video using the same kind of camera. We put on our glasses, and with the special joystick, we can teleport ourselves into that reality. And you can actually now broadcast. You can make a 360 broadcasting as well. Anyone can have those glasses. We can do that. I can give you an example of a presentation of a different project, which at the same time is happening in another place, and you can be a part of it. It's a very important and impressive tool that presents a new project of a developer, which can demonstrate a project. Virtual reality allows us to simplify the processes of decision making. And I suppose you all saw such companies as Volkswagen and other companies that use virtual reality helmets in order to design a car, and which allows the engineers to speed up decision making as to the certain spare parts the car should have. Or another example, in the sphere of training a truck driver. It's an old case, but it is a simulator. And these simulators are used in different areas, from piloting a plane or driving a train. But they're used to educate you, to train you how to deal with a non-standard situation or an emergency situation. The only thing you need to have is a small room which is equipped with the necessary gadgets. So, for instance, take a look at this. You're looking at a gas distribution station, and the video demonstrates what to do in an emergency situation, how to cut off the vent, for instance. And with virtual reality, we can reconstruct any site, any event, and we will be able to give you step-by-step instruction on what to do and how to do it, because otherwise it's a very expensive process to train a person. And all those companies are working with templates. Here you can you can construct an engine, and the only thing you have to do is just sit in your own room and use this virtual reality tool in order to create it. And then having been trained to do that, you can go to a realistic place to apply your skills. So this is a very serious trend, developmental trend, and I suppose that a lot of companies are going to substitute their present simulators for this system. I'd like to also dwell on art. The art and virtual reality don't really interact, do not really integrate currently. This is a classical sketch, but this particular sketch has been created in a virtual world, in a three-dimensional world. Currently, you can put on your glasses and walk inside the sketch or create an animation or a cartoon. And this is City Wife or it's perfectly accessible currently, and this is a new wave of virtual reality. It's becoming more and more popular. There are a number of exhibitions dedicated to that. Digital Bjorg is one of such exhibitions. Digital Bjorg uses digital video and CCY installations, which will allow you to travel all over the world using these gadgets. An interesting exhibition. I'd like to invite you to visit it. Who knows what this is? Can you guess what this is? Take a look at this picture. Can you guess what it is? A sword. A sword. Well, yes, the right answer is a sword. If I told you that it is a sword in virtual reality, you would say, so what? But it's not a sword. It's a world, and with the help of virtual reality, you can walk through the sword, which had been created within 30 minutes only, CCY, and is used here. And an artist does that within a span of time of 30 minutes. The artist did nothing really. He just combined all the instruments into this picture. You're not simply looking at the picture. You put on your glasses and you start walking through the picture. And this immersion is so powerful, really, that artists can open up their ideas in a totally different way, in a new way. This is another example on how real estate is being sold and bought. That's the worst example, of course. You see a van here, you go inside, take a look at the brochures and the examples and think of the interior that you like or dislike, and you base your decisions upon that. It is a reality, but it's inconvenient for people to make such an important decision based on a brochure. So as to simplify this decision-making process, we decide we have created a virtual showroom. This is a project that is currently underway in Moscow. The manager put on those glasses onto the prospective buyers. They're all in one room, and now they're walking through a virtual flat. They don't simply see a picture of the flat. They're walking through their prospective flat. As you see, these people are, shall we say, of a serious age, but...
So the people, they didn't even it took some seconds to learn, and she just put on the glasses, and her husband also put on the glasses, and they immediately started walking, and they felt quite comfortable. The manager sales manager is with them. He can demonstrate to them any flat on any floor, and so that's the reality, which speeds up the decision to buy or not to buy an apartment, and it's a very important important instrument. And just, I like it very much, as if it's something which happened 10 years ago. Just a person is just wearing those glasses, those VR glasses, is a normal thing.
Very shortly.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry to cut you off.
Да, в двух словах, конечно.
Oh, okay, in a couple of words. So virtual reality is certainly a very powerful instrument of the entertainment market.
Maxime. But we do want to bring in our last speaker before we get to the discussion. I would like to have a bit of time for questions, as we did start a bit late. So our last speaker is Konstantin Bacharski. He's the founder of Pressfeed, which I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, know and use. And he was formerly a journalist for the newspaper Kommersant, where he wrote about technology, business trends, and media.
Dear colleagues, I welcome you. Thank you for the chance to share with you my story. I think that it would be very close to many of you sitting here, and it seems I'm the person who is supposed or expected to deprive journalists of their jobs. Well, this is not so, and twice no. I'm just one of the participants of this major process, and as new technologies are coming into the media and into the sphere of creativity. And we're not talking about, let's say, depriving somebody of their jobs, but help people get rid of very boring, non-effective, and shameful for the proud name of the human being tasks. If I can get hold of the clicker, thank you. I can demonstrate to you a slide which I like very much. Just let me think how I should click it. The green one. So I like this phrase very much. If for your job it's possible to write a job description, then soon then robots will replace you at your job. So that's the essence of algorithm. If you can write an algorithm for a sequence of actions and everything is clear, then in the epoch of industrial revolution, some mechanical robots or some part of the assembly line would have appeared and replaced you. And now, at this stage of a new technological revolution, well, soft will replace you. And so this is a story about the classical conveyor belt of Henry Ford, because, well, the conveyor belt problems and challenges previously concerned primarily blue-collar workers, and we believed that white-collar workers would never be impacted by the disruptive technology of Henry Ford's conveyor belts and assembly line. But nevertheless, here we are here because it has reached us, and now we see that the automation has reached also the white-collar workers and creative workers, and I'm one of those who have felt this impact. We see how very complicated soft and programmatic solutions are entering our lives and help us give up some routine work, monotonous. But let me show you. Let me show you the following. All my life, I worked in the media, and for the past 7 years, I worked in the Kommersant publishing house. I was a journalist, I was an editor. I wrote lots of text. I like it very much. I do writing articles. I love communicating with people. But to be frank with you, there's a lot of routine in this work, just as any other creative job requires some routine, be it a journalist, advertisements writer, artist, musician, etc. Well, still, a routine is an integral part of our job. Let's say artists and painters should mix up paints. I must collect information, and 70% of my work was taken up by collecting facts. Because, well, there is, let's say, when you say to write an article, when we hear the word write, we think that, well, all you have to do is put your fingers on the keyboard and start typing. Nevertheless, 70% of time is taken up by collecting comments. Who is a journalist? Who are students? Okay, and math. Who writes texts? Actually. So then you know very well this problem. And my experience shows that in order to write an article, which should have 3 characters, I should first speak to 10, 15 people. I even had special Excel forms, and there I marked all my contact persons and whom I contacted through Twitter or by phone, etc. And so very often such information lines end in a failure. So you reach this person, you ask the question, but he doesn't give you this information. He's maybe running somewhere, he is out of time, he's incompetent, etc., etc. And they start speaking, talking on inconsequential things. I suddenly realized that I have 3 or 4 such cases, such stories, and such information links or lines. But unfortunately, this is just a monotonous operation. And in programming, there is such a mantra. When you come across a problem which can be replicated as a code, which you can automate this procedure, you don't have to manually go through the same motions and through the same processes. So I had to learn program writing, and sometime later the Pressfeed.ru service appeared. So we spread all kinds of journalist inquiries. When I need some exotic data, some exotic facts, I send my request to all the people. And so on the other side of this mass media pipe and information data pipe, I immediately see lots of responses. So I'm cutting edges. I'm saving my time. I'm saving hours. I'm saving days of collecting information for the article. And so I'm just talking about one step, collecting data and collecting facts for the future article. Now we have 3,000 editorial offices, 5,000 journalists, 1,500 requests per month, and but actually, in Yandex News, there's only 6,700 titles. It's very small. It's a very small amount, and so as I've said, 1,500 requests from journalists per month go through Pressfeed.ru, and in about 2 years, we'll be talking about hundreds of thousands, or maybe millions of questions and queries. So this is a process which was very small, and I was just almost alone when I started it, but now it's becoming mainstream. Now, artificial intelligence, which is going to rob us of our jobs. But on the other hand, let's look at it at the other side of the medal. It seems that we cannot automate creative work, but let's break it into several stages. So, what's my work? So first, select the title, select the topic, then to find factology, to write this text, so to print it, then find a photograph, think about the title, and publish it. And so Pressfeed already has optimized one of the stages of this process. And let's just, within the next 30 seconds, invent. How can we automate the selection of a title? How can we trust some metallic device with finding what a journalist should be writing today about? What hypothesis? What do you think about it? So the request from where? So, you know, I can give you a hint, a tip. Well, there are lots of metaphors about what's journalism and what's a journalist doing in his or her everyday work. But I like the following definition, that a journalist creates added value to information which existed before him. So we have an information landscape, and we add something to this information landscape, and it all depends on how valuable this new information is, how different this information is from the mainstream. And so I always thought about that. Like there is an information chart, for instance, which has peaks, and we're monitoring the exchange rate course, for instance. That's dollar to ruble, it's sort of moving 5 kopecks up, 5 kopecks down, and then all of a sudden there is an extreme. Then we have a peak. And so you think, oh, since there is such a large deviation, we've got to write about it. So it's just an event which is different from the general level of or standard norm of events, the traditional information landscape. And basing on this example, what conclusion we can make? If we agree on what parameters we are monitoring within a certain information space, let's say sports results, currency fluctuations, we can very easily track and trace the main indicators of these parameters. If some parameter jumps higher than the average level, for us it would be news. And so robots have been writing texts for a long time now about weather, sports, then traffic jams in Moscow. Yandex does it. Then in Bloomberg, lots of texts are generated within 1 second in this algorithm. And it's been happening for some time now.
We're all the participants of this process, and you don't necessarily have to wait for Skynet to enter into your lives and we'll take our jobs and start doing everything for us. We are already immersed in this process, and I suppose there are people among you who will think of their own machines, of their own soft, which will exclude routine from our lives and will allow us to concentrate on something really cool, really interesting. You see, I'm a journalist, but I have become an IT expert as well to a certain extent, and I'm trying to make the lives of my colleagues as convenient and as comfortable as possible. That's what I wish you do in the future as well.
We're going to move on to questions shortly, but I'd like to start a quick discussion first of all here amongst the panelists. And I'd like a show of hands as well. For you in the audience, who is worried about technology in the future? Who is concerned? Raise your hands if you're worried. There's one there. Most of you, the two. Most of you quite happy then. So most of you, okay. And who thinks that journalism does have a place in the future? And who thinks it doesn't have a place? And the rest of you aren't too sure. Okay. So let's go back to the added value which Konstantin mentioned and which Jean-Christophe mentioned a bit earlier as well. The added value being the creativity, being critical thought, but we heard some concern from Jean-Christophe that at the moment, the way that we use technology is eroding that critical thought and is eroding the ability for people to have original thought as well. First of all, just confirm that you think that is the case, that you're worried that we are losing, like the people in this room, are losing the capacity to have critical thought.
Pas les personnes dans cette...
Our colleagues who showed us the slide with primates, with gorillas, are actually right. And we...
Opinion on this. If that is the case, what is the best way to bring it back? What kind of education is needed in order to ensure that people can bring this human added value, which will become even more important as automation becomes more prevalent? And I'll start with Konstantin, and if you could then move to Adi and so on. Konstantin.
Thank you. Well, I don't think nothing absolutely new is happening or something threatening us is happening, but the level we're dealing with as far as our critical thinking is concerned, if we compare it with the end of the 19th or 20th century, we had less units of information to work with initially. Well, we could read a novel, and that would be important in our lives. We would have been studying columns and editorials in newspapers. Currently, we are passing to a new level, a meta level, where we don't pay attention to a specific unit of information, but we accumulate and aggregate information with a general view on what is happening. We're not trying to memorize things, but we need to know how to find the specific things we're interested in. So these are all links in one chain. But I think that the critical thinking is just the same as it was, but we're thinking in concepts. We're not thinking in terms of a particular article or unit information. We're thinking in concepts of a chain of events, things that are described by tens and dozens and of thousands of different events. And all in all, we can assess how we evaluate the situation, how to distinguish whether to trust or not, whether to trust the information or not. So these are those meta principles that we are using in order to decide whether it's a fake information or a true information. I don't think anything awfully bad is happening. We are still thinking critically. The antithesis would be by the end of the 19th century or the 20th century, when we could read a novel and draw the wrong conclusions or be influenced by other traits and characters. But in analyzing the criticism of our ancestors, we can say that it was a difficult process, a complex process as well. So a person doesn't change. Man doesn't change. The essence of man doesn't change.
The knowledge and the information exists for us to be as critical as we want to be. I think in many ways that is unrivaled in human history. The ability to access the knowledge that we have at the moment is incredible. And I think that's an amazing opportunity. But to an extent, the media industry gets what it wants and gets what it deserves, because we're in an age where people are looking for page views all the time. You've got to publish, and you've got to be getting a lot of traffic to your articles all the time. And it doesn't give you the time or the inclination to actually sit down, contemplate, is the thing that I'm publishing actually accurate? Am I giving it critical thought? Am I giving it an insight or an angle? Or am I just churning out content for the sake of churning out content and getting my page view numbers up? So I think if we want to have a return to an age where the media is actually critical and actually questioning what it is that they're producing, then I think we've got to perhaps reassess what it is we're looking for from journalists and give them the time to actually make use of the information that we've got available to us.
You know, for me, it was very interesting to learn in the morning that a country which is very seriously dependent on natural resources, that's the United Arab Emirates, announced the creation of two emirates. The first ministry is the Ministry on AI, Artificial Intelligence, and the second is the Ministry of Advanced Science. This is a very appropriate step because all non-existent today civilizations and non-existent today corporations lost in this competitive battle because they didn't want to change, because they closed themselves from progress for different reasons. Some, for instance, largely depended on authority in one hand and the unwillingness to change the management structure. Somewhere, for instance, it was a weak strategic vision. In the 90s, for instance, there were two major corporations that manufactured film for movies, but with the advent of digital camera, one company virtually went out of business, and the second they just will refocus, and now is in the chemistry business. And of course, from the point of view of revenue and profits, that it has regained its previous positions. But in this situation, it's very important for us to understand that no one is going to lose the jobs. No one is going to be forced to give up what you are doing, your professional. Well, the thing is that you have your hard skills, but you've got to change your soft skills. And you see how our children imbibe and take in information, how they analyze information, and their way of thinking and way of learning is changes, and the corporate culture should take it into account, and the individual culture should take into account. And corporations should certainly take such things into account and introduce them into your own strategic plans. And that's something that you are going to work not only in corporations in the private sector, but also in a government agency, for instance, wherever you are. It's all about the changing means and ways of obtaining information and processing this information. But I fully support the previous speakers who have already spoken much about that.
And finally, Maxim Kozlov, I know you're not involved in journalism, but you're involved in media and creativity, and you've shown us some very interesting examples of the work that you're involved in. But how difficult is it to get original ideas? Because now people like you and your colleagues, you're competing with a global marketplace, not just a Russian marketplace. Is this technology enhancing the creativity, or do we just have a mass of mediocre content, and it's still just as hard as ever to find the original, the interesting content?
Well, what can I say? When we're working with a client, we don't tell them that we are going to create virtual reality for you in order to augment your reality. What we do is we either come to the client or the client comes to us, and we ask him, what kind of a problem are you dealing with? And if the client knows the problem or the challenge that he's dealing with, then we can offer the necessary technology to deal with. Let's take company Kladmet. It had a number of outlets around the world, and it was important for people to come and make a decision within 10 to 15 minutes which tour to buy and where to go. So this Kladmet is a realistic case, and we offered them to install a showroom where a person could look through 30, shall we say, videos, 30 to 50 videos about with the information about a hotel or a site which a person wants to visit. And when the client actually knows where his interests lie and what the problems are, then we can offer a resolution to these problems. It's very easy to find something to offer this client. It becomes very easy.
About 5 minutes left, and I would like to give you the opportunity to ask some questions. Who has a question? We've got one in the front row. I don't know if there's a microphone coming round. Does anyone have a microphone for the... Yep, it's coming. And then after that, there's another question at the back, so we'll come to you afterwards. So this is the question here in the front row.
Good afternoon. My name is Nikolai. I'm from Yakutia. I'm a journalist. I worked at the Foresight session on media topics. It was very interesting that we discussed these topics in our working group, and we came to the conclusion that one of the ways of development are very negative, so to say, very pessimistic, that we will be substituted by robots. You remember the attacks of the bots on something that has already been written and sometimes written by a robot. So we need to think about that. But there are positive moments as well, as far as industrialization is concerned and automation is concerned. But the problems we're dealing and going to deal with are of an ethical character. The journalists lost the monopoly on the creation of content. That's not too bad, by the way. Of course, this is a severe reality for us, but there's still room for movement. We can still move forward. But the question is not dedicated to our profession. It's more along the lines of the development of the economy or an economic issue. You were talking about added value, which is very important because this is a youth festival, and we all know Karl Marx's work on added value. And we would like to ask Maxim, what is going to happen to this same added value with the introduction of bitcoins, for instance? We don't know who's going to produce these bitcoins, which robots are going to do that. Well, actually, I don't deal in macroeconomics, to tell you the truth, but I'll be able to answer that question as a banker. The market of cryptocurrencies, the most important issue is the regulation of the market. The technology of distributed registrars, which is the foundation of cryptocurrencies, is the future, and we are moving towards it. Currently, a lot of countries stop using cash to such a great extent and are moving towards cryptocurrencies. Therefore, the technology of distributed registrars allow to make this system more secure. They allow to introduce more security in card and non-cash transactions. And the second thing is it's a very powerful trend. These technologies are going to be used not only for computations and settlements, but also to verify the information, for the verification of information. And they will be important for you from that point of view as a user of information. So this technology is the future. But the question is, the most important question is how to regulate it. It lies in the sphere of regulation.
Keep the question. You can speak to Maxim after, because we are running out of time. I think we have time for one more. Is that right? Yeah, I think we have time for one last question. And as I say, if you do want to speak individually to the speakers, they will be around after this session. So last question, please.
Vladislav from Tyumenskaya district. When an artificial intelligence is working, the people benefit. Won't that make a person a slave owner or create in people or in humans the thinking of slave owners? And won't that degrade the human beings because they will not be apply their knowledge in practice or in real life? How will these problems be dealt with in the future? Are you thinking about them at all?
We haven't really covered ethics too much. It came up briefly, but yeah, the ethics of AI, when an AI becomes sentient, are we then, as you say, slave owners? What can and what can't we do? And is anyone working on these problems already? So does anyone want to jump in on that question? Anyone have an opinion? Jean-Christophe, then?
C'est extrêmement compliqué de vous répondre en quelques phrases. Le souci, il est que la ligne entre le bien et le mal est une ligne qui est...
This is really a serious problem, and it is not characteristic of all countries. We have a different mentality. All nations have different mentalities. We think differently from the Chinese or representatives of other nations. Will artificial intelligence, will it bring us some added value? Will it improve our life? That is a question. It will, but to a certain extent, we will become animals who can be guided or controlled. So who's going to be the hunter and who's going to be the hunted in that respect? It's like a weapon that can be used for peace and a weapon that can be used for war. It happens to us. And when it happens, we have to accept it as a reality. You can be you can oppose it, you can be pessimistic about it or optimistic about it, but you have to accept it as a reality. It's entering our lives. Of course, we need time. We've got different options. We've got the worst case scenarios, the best case scenarios to think of, and we need to ask ourselves what the future holds for us. And you're right that you're asking them.
So I was studying AI getting on for 20 years ago now, and it's been a technology that's been hyped for probably 60 years, and it's been flattering to deceive for about as long. And I don't think that there's been enormous advances in the actual technology and the science behind artificial intelligence in that time. What has changed is that we've got an awful lot more data to train the algorithms on, and we've got the computing power to actually do that computation. And so I'm a little bit, very skeptical of these dystopian notions that we're going to be slaves to machines anytime soon. I just don't think it's going to be happening. And I'm reminded of the projections back in the 50s and the 60s that labor-saving devices would mean that we'd have a life of leisure and we wouldn't have to do the hoovering and the ironing and all of these things that machines were going to do for us. And yet, of course, we still do. And so I just urge a note of caution that a lot of the AI industry at the moment is massively overhyped. We've got DeepMind and IBM and things like that, and they haven't really achieved that much actually out in the wild. They haven't achieved much in the marketplace. They've done some nice things with games and so on, but they haven't changed the world yet. So I just urge a slight note of caution before we get carried away with sci-fi notions that the world is going to be massively different to how it is now in the next 10 to 20 years.
We're going to have to leave it there. Well, we will wait and see. Maybe we'll come back in 10, 20 years to see how we'll look very different, that's for sure, all of us. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you to the organisers of the festival and the translators at the back who've been doing such a great job. And enjoy the rest of the festival. Again, if you have any more questions, by all means, approach the speakers on the stage. They're all very friendly. Thank you very much.